Okay, Boker Tov, or where I am, Sarayim Tovim. It's broadcasting, I guess, for the first time in Israel. It's the first time I'm here since before COVID. So it's before we started all these, Zoom classes. So it's nice to be here. And really, I want to thank people coming, 8 o'clock in the morning. It's nice and early on the East Coast. So, and it's even earlier on the West Coast. Somebody just emailed me there on the West Coast, so it's 5 a.m. So especially Yasher Koach. And I appreciate everybody who comes. That's what gives you the inspiration to prepare and to keep learning. So it's in your merit that we have these classes. Thank you very much. Okay, so I looked over my notes. I don't know if anybody looked over their notes to discuss what did we discuss last year on Chanukah. So I won't ask if anybody remembers because but basically we went we'll pick up just for a few minutes. We're in the middle of Al Nisim. We discussed a little bit about Chanukah being a day of Hallel v'Hoda'ah, praise and thanksgiving, and we discussed the bracha. Bayamim hahem ubezman hazeh or bezman hazeh. What is the difference? Are we thanking God for miracles then and now, or miracles then that impact us on now? It's a pretty, that's I guess a fundamental difference. And we went through just I think we did mainly we were discussing the Al Hanisim. We didn't quite finish, so I just want to pick up a couple points. I ended off. Anybody remembers? That's the extra bonus from last year. I ended off by saying that that Rav Aaron Soloveitchik's idea, which that we praise God that the few defeated the many and the weak defeated the strong. So that we understand, that makes sense. But to say that the pure defeated the impure, or the righteous defeated the wicked is very nice. But what does that have to do with anything? That's like not to do whether you're pure or not has nothing to do with the war. So Rav Aaron Soloveitchik, I think we know it is, but it's just that's where I first heard it expressed, is that the way an evil person fights a war is very different. Israel has a code of ethics. Moral countries have codes of ethics that they do, and the other terrorists do whatever they want. So we're always fighting with our half a hand behind our back, because we won't do the same things that our enemies will do. And that's, I think, it's a beautiful, simple idea. Unfortunately, we see it all the time in the world. And so that's where we left off last year. Okay, so I want to pick up where I just want to spend a few minutes on Al Hanisim, then we're going to go into a few other ideas. So if you have a Siddur, Al Hanisim, find it, in the end of the Shemona Esrei. And I don't have all my books here, of course, but I just have in my Magerman Siddur, page 183. But I imagine nobody has that Siddur, the daily Magerman edition of the Koran Siddur. Anyway, so I just want to say, I found this an interesting idea in the Eitz Yosef, one of the commentaries on the Siddur, when we say the Matityahu, that was the other discussion we had. Who was Yochanan Kohen Gadol? Is that the same Yochanan who was the high priest for 80 years and then went off the path? And that's an interesting question, who that Yochanan is. But be that as it may, that was last year's talk. You can listen to it if you'd like. So Lashkicham Toratecha. So the Greeks wanted to make us forget the Torah. Because I find it hard to believe this is actually what it means, but I thought it was just very interesting. He said that the reason the Greeks did that is because they were basically jealous of the Torah, because they know how beautiful the Torah is. And he refers to the verse in Torah B'Chanan, which I think is really one of the most important verses in the entire Chumash. It's very underplayed. That's the verse. Maybe I should have put it on to share screen, but Devarim, I think it's chapter 4, verse 6 or something like that. It's the beginning of Beth Hanan. And the Torah tells us that we should keep the mitzvot. Moshe tells the Jewish people, we mentioned this verse before, because this is your wisdom and your knowledge from the nations of the world. The nations of the world, when they see the Jewish people keeping the Torah, they're going to say, wow, what a smart people, what an amazing people. That's basically the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. That's the role of the Jew, that we have to be the smartest nation, which has really a double meaning. It has a moral meaning. We have to be the leaders in morality, and it has an intellectual meaning. We have to be the leaders in science. And the Gemara on Shabbat 75a makes that comment based on this verse that Jews have to study science. The Gemara says astronomy. That was the science of the time. So the Gemara says there's an obligation on Jews to study science because that's what the nations consider to be smart. So it means Jews have to be the best doctors and the best computer scientists and the best everything. It's a pasuk in Chumash. So that's how the Eitz Yosef explains that Lashkicham Toratecha, that the non-Jews wanted the Greeks saw how beautiful Torah is, and that it's the wisdom of the world, it's the greatest, and they didn't want that to live up to that. So they wanted to be the highest. So they wanted the Jewish people to not to study science, or I don't know, not to combine science and Torah. They probably did want them to study science. It was the idea of the moral, the spiritual code that goes along with it. I say I don't know that that's the real meaning of the word, but I do think it's a fascinating idea, and that's really the idea. This pasuk, which is a very important pasuk, that we have an obligation that the nations of the world should say that the Jewish people are really smart. We have those ideas, you see them. I don't know if it's really true that they study Talmud in South Korea, but that's the type of thing that is based on, and we should be proud of these things because that's part of our mission. Okay, that was just one thing I wanted to add on Lashicham Toratecha. The other thing is Oskei Torah Techa. Okay, he says we're involved in Torah, right? That the bracha of Lasok b'divrei Torah. And I just want to point out, and then we'll move on, that of course, as is, I'm sure you all know, the Al Nisim, while it mentions the oil, it mentions that they came into the temple and they lit the Pinua Techalecha, they cleaned out the I don't know if I mentioned this last year, which we'll get to a little bit later. Danish Berber in his fantastic book, Minhagei Yisrael. So he has one of his 8-volume work on the history of Minhagim. So in volume number 5 is totally on Chanukah. So he discusses there, and it's actually, he quotes it in Greek. If you want, I don't know if you can see the letters here. I couldn't read the words, obviously, but Danish Berber can. Here, you see all the Greek. Can you see all the Greek that he puts in there from all the sources that basically it's not exactly true that the Cheshbonim, it's not the way we present the story that on the 25th of Kislev, they came into the temple and lit the candles. That's not really what happened. He said really that happened in Cheshvan. They came in the first time. So even if the menorah lit, what you think they could get the temple up and running one day, the Greeks said the whole temple, it was strewn all over the place. Stuff. It took weeks. And we know that they picked the Kapei Kislev because that was the date that the second temple had been dedicated. Rabbi Liptak spoke about that last week on Sunday in his shir. So it's not so simple. It's very likely that whatever the oil or the first lighting of the menorah actually happened a number of weeks earlier and later. But there is no mention here. It says upinu et heichalecha. They had to clean the heichal. Presumably that took some time. Remember all the it's not just the oil, everything else is tamei. After Yontif, it's an amazing halacha. The Jewish people on Yontif, everybody comes to the Beit HaMikdash on Yontif. So how do we know everybody is tahor? Right, you're not allowed to enter the Beit HaMikdash unless you've been to mikvah and you haven't been in contact with a dead body. So a million Jews, 100,000 Jews come to the temple. So you think they're all so careful about these laws? So the halacha was, no, we can trust them, we can believe them. For Simchat Yontif, we want everybody Yontif, everybody's nice and good, and we want to think everybody's right. And then the Mishnah says an unbelievable thing. That's very nice over Yontif. You know what happens right when Yontif ends? They have to be matayir, the entire Beit HaMikdash. They have to assume there were thousands of Jews who really weren't tahor. We don't make a big deal about it on Yontif. It's like so funny. And they had, I don't know if that's the right word, but they had backup for all the vessels in the temple because they had to make them tahor from all the Jews who had become tamei. So here too, it wasn't there was a process. It wasn't like the Judah Maccabee walks into the temple on the 24th of Kislev, lights the candle, lights for 8 days, and the temple's up and running the next day and everything's back to normal. Clearly, this was a much longer process. And it says, of course, they lit, then they wrought, but it doesn't say anything about it being, it lasting 8 days. It says we made an 8-day festival, but that's, I think I wrote about that, no, in my last article, or maybe it's when I'm writing. that it's 8 days, at least according to the book of Maccabees, because because Sukkot was 8 days. Chanukah, that's the one I'm writing now. Chanukah was a copy of Sukkot. There are many parallels. So the 8, it's whatever it is, and it's in the Gemara. The 8 days has to relate to the oil, but not in Al Nisim. Al Nisim, it doesn't relate to the oil at all. Just they lit the oil, but there's no mention of any miracle or any. That's the reason we make Chanukah for 8 days. Okay. Any questions? Then we're going to move on. Okay. All right.
Yeah, just a quick question. Yes. Okay. I just don't have it clear. Did they actually have the original menorah in the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, or did they have to? I don't know. Did the right? Because that's not so clear to me.
I'll tell you what. Danny Sperber begins his article, this first article, that he quotes Rav Zevin. He says the magisterial work. I mean, Rav Zevin, Rav Shlomo Yosef Zevin. Every people know who he is. Everybody know who Rav Zevin is. Anybody know who? Of course. I'm sorry. Yeah, Modim Bahalacha. Rav Zevin was the founder of Encyclopedia Talmudit. Rav Zevin was an amazing Torah scholar. He died in the late 70s. And he had an uncanny ability to present complex subjects so very simply. And he writes beautifully. And Modim Halacha is a real classic work. And but it was his idea to come up with Encyclopedia Talmud. So in his essay on Chanukah, Rav Zevin quotes about 28 problems with Chanukah. How did they light the menorah? Weren't the Maccabees, they're also Tamei. They're in a war, so they're also Tamei. So what good did it do? They found oil. How are they going to light the oil? And 25 questions like that. And every question, there's this answer, that answer, maybe this, and he comes up with the point, whenever you have a piece of Gemara with 94 questions, you maybe have to relook at the whole thing. It's true, you can give an individual answer to each particular question, but maybe there's a whole new approach to look at it. That's really how he starts his article here. So I don't know exactly what the menorah was and what they had. We know we did have the menorah in the Second Temple. We know they didn't have many. They didn't have the Urim V'Tumim. They didn't have the Aron Kodesh, of course. Already in the end of the First Temple, they didn't have the Aron Kodesh. But I assume they did have the menorah. Whether they made a new menorah, I don't know. He claims that the original lighting of the candles was with their war spears. That's what they lit the candles with. They came in from the fight, and they turned over the spears, and they put a candle on top. But okay,
yeah, I think that's in Maccabees. Malka Simkovich shared that.
Right, so. What it is.
So then that's why I thought 1 minute. What happened to the original menorah? Maybe they were cleaning it.
I have no idea. I mean, did the Greeks destroy it? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know because I'm ignorant, or I don't know because it's not known. I guess the fact that I don't know why I don't know means I'm ignorant, but whatever. I'm not exactly sure if it's known. I just don't know. I'll try to check. Zeb wants to know when Al Nisim was composed. That's a good question. I don't know either. I'm sorry. Good. Keep stumping.
Who composed it?
Okay. I don't know who composed a lot of our tefillot. I don't know who composed it. We'll get to Haneirat Halalu. That we'll get to who composed that. But I don't know who composed Al Nisim.
Were the Anshe Knesset Agdola around then?
I'm sorry?
Were the Anshe Knesset Agdola around then?
The Anshe Knesset Agdola period was over by the time of Chanukah. We were into our Zugot, the beginning of the period of the Zugot, in between the Anshe Knesset Agdola and the Tanaim and the authors of the Mishnah. So it's probably the time of Yossi ben Yoezer and Yossi ben Yochanan, probably the ones, that's the first group of in Pirkei Avot. We have the 5 generations, right? We're talking about the 165 or so BCE, right? Hillel and Shammai die around the year 0, more or less. The Gemara says they 100 years before the destruction of the temple. That would put the year 30 BC. I don't know if that's died. They flourished, so and they're the 5th generation. So sort of work is the Anshe Knesset is also shrouded in mystery a little bit. We don't exactly know, so we don't know too much about them, who they were, and that's Rav Soloveitchik's beautiful idea, anonymity, that the greats of our tradition don't have to need their names known. We know very few people who served in the Anshe Knesset Gdola, but we do know our basic life today. They made brachot. They made the Shmon Esrei, Kiddush, Havdalah, brachot. That's what the Gemara says, and they put together our Tanakh, the Anshe Knesset Gdola. So the basic patterns of life that we do today: brachot, Tfilot, Kiddush, Havdalah, the Tanakh, that was all done by the Anshe Knesset Agdola. They were quite a powerful group. We know Ezra was probably the founder of Anshe Knesset Agdola. So Ezra's 5th century before the Common Era, earlier. So this is much later. Okay, but let's go on to. Let me start with I'll start with a well-known question: is why Chanukah is not mentioned in the Mishnah? So that question leads a slight clarification. Chanukah really only appears once in the Gemara, and that's in Masechet Shabbat, and it's sort of like this. That's how we get there, because the Gemara, we say those who daven Ashkenaz. Remember, what do we light the candles with on Friday night? That's that chapter. So you can't use this, you can't use that. Why not? Because if the flame isn't smooth and isn't working well, you may come to adjust it on Friday night, and that's a no-no. But the question is, so the Gemara says, what about Chanukah candles? Well, can you use them? It depends. If you can't use them, it doesn't matter, etc., etc. The Gemara has a discussion. Those things that are invalid on Friday night, are they good for Chanukah? And from there, the Gemara has a couple pages on Chanukah, and that's it. Not so much. And then Machloket Beit Hillel Beit Shammai, a few odds and ends. It's in the middle of nowhere. That if we didn't have the mitzvah of candle lighting on Friday night, it probably wouldn't appear in the Gemara either. But it doesn't appear in the Mishnah. It appears in the Mishnah in peripheral cases, like if somebody in Bava Kama, if somebody leaves the Chanukah candles outside his store, and I'm riding on my horse and with my camel or whatever, and the hay on my camel catches fire from the Chanukah candles and it burns the store, who has to pay for it? So normally you put something on the street, you have to pay for it. You can't put fire on the street. But Chanukah candles, you're allowed to put them outside. So maybe allowed but no outside. So the horse owner has to be careful to know there's going to be Chanukah candles there, and therefore he better be careful. So therefore he has to pay. That's what Rabbi Huda says, but we don't follow that opinion. I also find this a beautiful idea. We follow the rabbis. You want to be religious, that's your problem. Don't put fires outside, don't do this, don't do that. I was on the plane flying through Israel 8 hours ago, and this happened a little bit more than 8 hours ago, maybe 15 hours ago, and all of a sudden I hear Mo Sur Yeshua and the whole bunch of singing, and they're like 20 people. I was getting nervous. Well, what's going on here? So I was schmoozing. They lit they brought 5 flashlights. 5 mini flashlights. No, I don't. I don't think you have to light on a plane. The mitzvah is ner ishu beito. They did not make a bracha. I asked him. He didn't make a bracha. The mitzvah is ner ishu beito. You have to live in a house. A light per household. But anyways, that's it's just kind of interesting. Okay, I see. Okay, but let me get back.
You light in the hotel?
Yeah. So why? So there the halacha is it's too bad. You want to light Chanukah candles, and even though you have to light them outside, you still can't cause a fire. That's not an excuse enough to exempt you from a fire that's caused because of the Chanukah candles you put outside. So it's mentioned there in the Mishnah. It's mentioned Mikra Bikurim, according to one opinion. Bikurim can be brought to Chanukah. It's mentioned in Megillah, where the Mishnah talks about what the Torah reading for all the days. So Rabbi Yehuda sort of Chanukah was a given, but he doesn't talk about it. There's no mention of what Chanukah is, how candles, mitzvahs, nothing. So the question is, why not? So this is a fascinating discussion. Anybody want to throw out any ideas? I know what you heard.
Isn't that an idea that Hanukkah wasn't observed for like something 100 or 200 years after the event?
Right. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is living 350 years after the event. Right. So by his time, either Chanukah is in or out, like you would think. 165, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi finishes the editing of the Mishnah. According to the Gemara, who was born on the day Rabbi Akiva was killed, Dor Holech Dor Ba, that's 135. He's born. Whether that's, again, I don't know if is literal, but he edited the Mishnah around the year 220. So this is 350 years after the story of Chanukah has taken place. So the question is, there's plenty of, we have a whole Masechet on Purim. Megillah, Masechet Megillah, Megillah Nikra B'Yad Aleph, B'Yad Beit, Yud Gimel, Yud Dalet. It's another question why it's not in in Tanakh, but that's not going to be our question now. That's I think so I always like to start with the reason of the Khatam Sofer and the great Hungarian leader of Hungarian Jewry, 1762, 1839, the battler of reform. I mean, that's not really the most important thing he did, but that's what he's often famous for, because the people don't study what he actually did. But the Chadash Asher Min HaTorah, that was his phraseology, that which is a Mishnah taken out of context, that anything new is forbidden from the Torah. In the Mishnah, that's an expression in the Mishnah, actually. That means the new wheat is forbidden to eat till you bring the Korban Omer. But he took it out of context in his attack on reform. The Khatam, that's why I tell you this background, because you hear what his answer is. Well, he sounds like a university professor. The Khatam Sofer now is going to give an answer. To me, sounds like a maskil, a reform maskil. That's what it sounds like. What does he say? He says, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi didn't want Chanukah. He wasn't into Chanukah. He didn't think it should be a holiday. Why didn't he think it should be a holiday? Because
No sovereignty.
I'm sorry?
They lost their sovereignty.
No, so that I discussed in the article I sent out. Why did Chanukah continue to be celebrated in the year 70? That's totally different. We'll see, that's nothing to do with this. That's a separate question, right? Why should Chanukah? No, he said it for much more mundane reasons. He says separation of church and state. That's begins in the Torah, not the American model. Lo yasur shevet mihuda mechochek miven raklav Yaakov Avinu, that the melucha, the kingdom is for the tribe of Judah, and the religious leadership is the tribe of Levi, the Kohanim, and oy vay voy, when the religious leaderships are the political leaders. That's really bad. And that's what the Chashmonaim did. They took over the religious leadership. They were Kohanim, and they became corrupted. It's not the first time in history that's happened. And therefore, and Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi is a descendant of Shevet Yehuda. That's why he's called, Hanassi. He's like the Davidic dynasty. So he felt this was, what are we celebrating Chanukah? What happened to Chashmonaim? So they got to, no, this is really bad. That's like it's hard for me to envision. I envision the Khatam Sofer Bichlav, but the Khatam Sofer says this to me sounds like a university professor. He didn't like Hanukkah, but okay, that's quoted. That's what the Khatam Sofer says. Now the Rambam would seem to totally disagree with this, and this. The Ramban is probably based on the Ramban. It's the Ramban on that verse, Lo Yasur Shevet Miyehuda, who's very critical of. He mentions, I believe, there in Vayechi. We'll read it in a couple of weeks. The Chashmonaim that they took over, and it was wrong and it was bad. I don't think he says we shouldn't celebrate Chanukah, and I'm not even sure Rabbi Yehuda, and I don't think he was totally saying that. He was just saying it's not thing to celebrate here. So now, by the way, that could be why we changed the focus of Chanukah to the oil. In other words, the Rambam's focus, as we're going to see in a moment, because the Rambam didn't apparently have this problem. The Rambam's focus is on the military victory. If you read the Rambam, I didn't pull it up. Whatever. I won't do sources today. If you'll forgive me, but there may be the Rambam in Hilchot Chanukah begins with the history of Chanukah, and he says there, he tells the whole story, what happened in the Chashmonaim, and therefore we have this holiday, and because the Jewish people were sovereign for more than 200 years. That's how the Rambam writes. The Jewish people were sovereign for over 200 years. Let's just see if I can find it. You know what? Let me share it with you because I think it's important. Give me 1 second. Okay, yeah. Let me share my screen. I'll show you what the Rambam has to say. Okay, let's go to Zoom. Let's go to share screen. Okay, so I don't know how many people have read it. By the way, Hilchot Chanukah begins in chapter 3 of Hilchot Purim. And Hilchot, right here, see here, Megillah, the Chanukah, because Purim and Chanukah go together, one holiday. I mean, it's kind of fascinating how the Rambam does that. So the Rambam writes, to the beginning. Okay, but by Cheney in the second temple, when the Greeks did decrees on the Jewish people, they made them, they nullified their religion. Well, why did that just happen there? I have no idea why this side happened. Below and they couldn't observe Torah and mitzvot. They stole our money. It keeps coming up. they raped our daughters. Maybe I could in English. I don't know what's going on here. B'notayim, b'nipnesu leheichal. They went into the temple. They made timu. They made it impure, and sar lehem Yisrael. They made it lots of troubles for the Jewish people. Lots of pressure. God had mercy on us. He saved us. He mentions specifically the Kohanim Gedolim. Hargum, they fought. And they appointed a king from the Kohanim. So I see that doesn't seem to bother the Rambam. Rambam saying this is part of the story why we celebrate Chanukah. They thought they were Kohanim and they appointed a king. That's the Ramban says, we don't do that kind of stuff, right? And the kingdom returned to the Jewish people for more than 200 years. That's why we celebrate Chanukah. He doesn't nothing to do with the oil. He didn't mention one word. Did he mention the oil? Nothing. Jewish sovereignty for 200 years. That's why we celebrate Chanukah. Then he mentions oil. Kishavru was the 25th of Kislev, and then they only found one flask of oil. Okay, very nice. But that's what the Rambam says. Now, I don't like to talk politics. I mean, I do, just not when I give my shiurim. It's very, you can see this very much as like how do we view when secular people establish a state of Israel? That's basically what's going on here. The Rambam is saying, who cares if they were sinners? He doesn't mean they returned Jewish sovereignty. Yeah, so they didn't do the right. I don't care. Having a Jewish state is worthy of celebration. We'll worry about the religious stuff later. And the Ramban and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is saying, no, this is not good. This is the mixture, the corruption. We don't want to have that. But that's just very interesting. So that's the first reason why it's not mentioned. And then the Rambam apparently thinks it's a good thing. He doesn't seem to have a problem with it, but it's fascinating. I find it fascinating. Rav Soloveitchik, by the way, had a totally different take on why the Rambam gives history. This is like, in Ripley's Believe It or Not. So, the most difficult Rambam of all, right? When you learn in yeshiva, so you learn, difficult Rambam. That's what the Briskers do all day. They solve difficult Rambams. The Rambam's contradicting himself. We don't understand this. No, this is the Rambam's here. That's what you do in life. You solve the Rambam's problem. And the Rav, the Soloveitchik family, the Briskers, they're the defenders of the Rambam, always justifying the Rambam. So what's the most difficult Rambam of all? I think by far, the most difficult Rambam of all. So it's in his introduction to the Mishnah Torah, where the Rambam writes, why he calls this book the Mishnah Torah, the second Torah. Why? So this is what the Rambam says.
You don't need to know
why they
anything
print
else.
his books. He said, because you only need two books in your library. You need a Tanakh and you need a Rambam. That stuff 1,000 years in the middle, Mishnah, Gemara, Tosefta, Midrash, you don't need any of that stuff. Because you're going to spend your life studying philosophy. That's what a Jew's supposed to do. You have to know how do you live your life as a Jew. So bottom line, here's the here's all this stuff. This is Hilchot Shabbos and Hilchot this. You don't need that. Don't waste your time learning Gemara. Who cares? Back and forth by Rabbi Yalkagam with Yehu Shalom Itali. Why? What's that going to help you? Just know what bottom line, what the halakha is. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know. You say have a Tanakh, have a Mishnah Torah. That's it. So Jewish history couldn't take that. They would call it Yad HaChazakav, although we still do call it the Mishnah Torah. It's pretty, I always quote, and always somebody gets mad at me, no, that's not what the Rambam meant. I said, I don't know, that's what I think he meant. I didn't pull it up. It's pretty, that's what the words mean. So Rav Soloveitchik says, based on that, you don't know about Chanukah. See, Purim, I don't have to tell you the story. Pesach, it's in Tanakh, but Chanukah is not in Tanakh. So the Rambam assumes you have no other books in your library except Tanakh. So therefore, I have to tell you the story of Chanukah. Very different than the way we were explaining it. It also sounds like I say Ripley's Believe It or Not. This is like, unbelievable. But okay, but the Rambam clearly begins, but he's clearly emphasizing Jewish sovereignty. Now let's give a totally different reason. Maybe what the Rambam would say. So why isn't it in the Mishnah? If it's a good thing, you don't like care for the Khatam Sofer. You think it's okay for the religious people to be in politics, right? I always like Jonathan Sachs's line, right? Jonathan Sachs says, when you mix religion and politics, anybody know what he says? you get bad politics and worse religion. It's a beautiful line. Okay, and so the other people say that the very much more simple reason, they didn't want to antagonize the Romans. If the Rambam is right, it's all about a military victory. I mean, that's you notice that in the Gemara, even they don't talk about the military victory. When the Gemara talked about it, it's only about the oil. The Romans, oh, hold on, these Jews rebelled against the Greeks and they made an 8-day festival. We don't like that. We're going to have to, we better put those Jews in check. So some say they were afraid to put it in. It's also, I find that a little bit hard to believe, but I don't know. I mean, we don't really know. The truth of the matter is, it's a big problem. I have to reread Margolis, Reuven Margolis, who was he wrote on things like this. Very beautiful, like sort of in between scholarship and traditional. He was like a traditional European Rab, but he writes on issues like this, and part like tefillin and tzitzis aren't mentioned in the Mishnah. Tefillin and tzitzis are not mentioned in the Mishnah. It's also strange. Why are they not mentioned in the Mishnah? So what's not in the Mishnah is not necessarily indicative of what how important it is. But it is a fascinating discussion why it's missing at the view, because we want to downplay Chanukah, and that's what I say. Perhaps that's why we shifted the focus to the oil. Perhaps not, and or no, there are other mundane reasons, and it's just a fascinating historical question. How important is Chanukah? We celebrate Chanukah differently, because if you take the Rambam, that's the question that we're alluding to. Or if in the year 70 the temple is destroyed, what are we celebrating? So this I discussed last year in our Shurim, and I wrote about it in Vertor, so I don't want to really spend time on it. But it's the holiday of hope that even though we're going into exile, we're going to be okay. We're going to still have light in the darkness. Okay, and then the rest we can discuss. Okay, now I want to spend a few minutes on Hanerot Halalu. Yocheved, I see you had your hand up on this. Okay, yeah, before we move on.
Yeah, okay, so I was looking carefully at Al Hanisim after hearing all these different shiurim about the origin of the holiday, etc. And I noticed, so it starts off with Bimei Matisyahu ben Yochanan, in his days, right? So there's a concession that yes, Matisyahu was, in charge then, but then the middle does not use him as the subject of any of the sentences. It says, V'ata bracha mecha harim. We're speaking to God. You're the one who stood up and fought for us. And then at the end, V'achakein ba'u banecha. So I was thinking it's a very delicate way of, the nod to Matisyahu, but really we're putting God in the center.
Yeah.
And also,
I don't know that I would say that as anything. Nothing. I think that's a very Jewish idea that the man has to do everything, but ultimately we believe God is the military chief. We have to go fight. We can't rely on God. So we mentioned this time about but our thanksgiving is to God. Remember, Al Nisim is instituted to be said in Tefillah. So it's
okay. But if you compare it to the Rambam,
I understand what you're saying. You want to say that it's a way to just sort of downplay the role of Matityahu, but I first of all, it's more his children. He himself didn't become corrupt, as far as I know. So it's more, so it's I don't think they're doing that to downplay. I think they're doing it to upplay. We say this in Berachat Hoda'ah. What's the Berachat Hoda'ah? To give thanks to God. That's the whole nature of the bracha. So we're going to emphasize that. I spoke last year also about why Al Nisim there in learning we emphasize the oil, and in prayer we emphasize the war. That makes a lot of sense, because prayer is very practical. We get health, wealth, wisdom. So war, we have to win the war. And learning, and we're learning a shtickle Gemara where our interest is not in the war. That's a necessary precondition. But the goal is what's the purpose of Chanukah? What do we learn about Chanukah? So it's the spiritual aspect. So that's why sort of one is in the Gemara, one's in Al Hanisim. That's my own interpretation. I don't know if it's true, but I think why on our tefillah we focus on the war, and on our learning we focus on the oil. Okay, but if there like I said, okay, Al Nisim composed that. Oh, there any other questions here?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you this discussion. Is it at all related to the difference, like in the Torah reading, between Chutz La'aretz and Eretz Yisrael on the days of Chanukah? Why do we? I once heard something.
It's interesting. We in Chutz La'aretz, that's you now in Chutz La'aretz, read the Torah that the third Aliyah does the next day, right? And I think in Israel they just do the same day. But we have that issue on Sukkot. So I don't know if it's like a Sveika Diyoma, we should be doing the day before, not the day after, but I assume it relates to that. Now we don't do a Sveika Diyoma on Chanukah, right? We don't observe Chanukah for 9 days in Chutz La'aretz. For all kinds of reasons. The most simple reason is because it's only a rabbinic thing. It's we have a safek. We don't know in theory at the time we didn't know the calendar. So when you have a safek, a doubt on a Torah law, you have to be strict. When you have a doubt on rabbinic law, you don't have to be strict. That's one reason. The other reason is whenever it's something you count, we don't count Sfiras Omer, which may be a biblical mitzvah, maybe not anymore. We don't count in Chutz La'aretz today is day 2 or day 3. Like we don't do that. Because whenever you count, you have to have it has to be a real number. Can't it's either day 4 or day 5. What do you mean it's day 4 or day 5? That doesn't work. We can observe an extra day yontif in case we're nervous that we have the wrong day. But
Kelman,
yes.
I think the answer is simple because you need 3 psukim for 3. You need 9 psukim for.
No, but the question is, why do we read day 4? Like today they read day 5 and day 6 in Chutz La'aretz, whereas in Israel they only read day 5. They only read day 5.
So how do they get 3 aliyahs?
They read day 5 a second time.
Oh, because here we do it. We add
Correct. That's what I'm saying. Here we do it right. I understand. Here, right? Correct. That's what I'm saying. On Sukkot, they'll read on Chol HaMoed in Israel Ubayom HaShlishi 4 times over, and we do 3 days. So it's whatever. It's different. But okay, but since we're running out of time, and I have to end a little bit early because it's almost Shabbos here. So let's quickly go to Hanerot Halalu on the Matlikim, and then okay. So Hanerot Halalu on the Matlikim that we say after we light the Chanukah candles. So this is not mentioned anywhere in the Gemara, not in the Bavli, not in the Yerushalmi, not in the Gonim, not in the Rambam. It comes from Masechet Sofrim, which is earlier than the Rambam, but it's really, and Danny Sperber also has a whole article about this on the history of Hanerot Halalu. It's really the Maram of Rutenberg. The Maram of Rutenberg is the 13th century, of course, was the one who was taken captive, dies in 1293. So the Maram of Rutenberg, who is his famous student, is the Maram of Rutenberg is considered the last of the Balei HaTosafot, the last of the Tosafos. That's the Maram of Rutenberg. He was a very important figure. I'm sure everybody's heard of him. They may not know so much about him, but we have a mezuzah in shul because he had a dream. That's one of the cute things we do. On your house, you don't need a mezuzah in a shul. And the Maram of Rutenberg had a dream that I don't know, I forget all the details of the dream, but they weren't so happy there wasn't a mezuzah in the shul. So I said, okay, we'll put a mezuzah in the shul without a bracha. So I think that's the minhag today. You put a mezuzah in the shul. All right, that's not so important. Maybe it is important. But so he was the one who instituted it. Why? Because really there was a debate on whether you could use the Nerot Chanukah to study Torah. So the Gemara says, I can't count money. I can't look at my stock market investment. You don't want to look at them now anyways, the way the stock market's going. But you can't read the stock market with the Nerot Chanukah because that's using it for a secular activity. But for Torah, right, it's one mitzvah, let's do another mitzvah. That would be wonderful. So that was a debate already. So the Maram Rutenberg took the opinion from Israel. No, we don't do that. And he wanted to stress that. And therefore, that's really what it came in. There are different nuskaot of Hanerot Halalu, and Danny Sperber goes through it. Them and the original ones, they wanted to have 36 words. Why 36 words? Why 36 words? Double chai, right? No, that's not
36 candles.
36 candles on the 8 nights, correct. Some have 44 words. Yeah, the Shabbos have 44 words. Ours, I don't know what ours has. Different nuskot. Anyways, okay, that's just very, very briefly. Rav Soloveitchik again had a whole no. The Nerot Halalu is much more. It became much more. It's Persume Nisa. You have to publicize the miracle. So maybe when they were lighting outside, it wasn't so important. That's just maybe I'm throwing that out on my own. I don't know if there's any truth to that. In other words, maybe they didn't say Hanerot. I said it's not mentioned in the earlier sources. Probably Maram Rutenberg is later. Already at the time of the Maram Rutenberg, they've already been lighting inside for a long time. But still, maybe they didn't have to publicize the miracle. Lighting outside was publicizing the miracle, and but inside not. So it's a form of Persume Nisa. that say Haneir Halalu, what you're for, which leads us to our shamash, which will be, I guess, our last topic we'll talk about. We'll have to leave Ma'asur, please God, for next year. So because there's only one Shabbos this year. Okay, so the shamash. So first of all, it's very interesting, Danish Berber. A lot of what I'm getting is from this fantastic book. Like I mentioned, Min Hagei Israel, Volume 5. I don't think it's been translated into English. Danish Berber is from London originally. He was in London. He was a child during the Nazi bombardments in World War II. He was a little kid. Anyway,
It looks like there is an English translation.
Is there? Okay.
Yeah, I just
Very
looked it up. The Jewish
Okay,
life
great.
cycle.
Read it.
Yeah.
It's worth reading. He's fantastic. His footnotes are even better than the articles. Like the footnotes are wow. On with he's a tremendous scholar, really a tremendous scholar, and of course a very big Talmud Chacham. And the combination of that is there's him and Shner Lyman. There are others too, but those are the two who I personally know. I think are two of the greatest, who combine serious Talmudic scholarship of the first rank with serious academic scholarship. There are very few people who combine those. Anyways, so he basically says there was no shamash when they lit the candles outside. Because why do you like the shamash Amar Rava? But sarich ner acheret. If you want to get benefit from the light, we just said haneir halalu kodashim. You're not allowed to get benefit. But when you're lighting outside, no one's going to sit outside and read a book by Chanukah. So it's only when they brought the menorah into the house that, therefore, new in the house. So maybe it's part of the lights. They didn't have electricity. You have to realize having 8 nights and 5 people lighting 40 candles, that gives a lot of light. You're going to use that light. So so we needed a shamash to indicate. And the way I understand it is not a way I never really thought of it before. It's not that if you want to read, you need a shamash. No, you need a shamash to demonstrate that the rest of the candles you wouldn't use. It's not that I only needed a shamash if I'm going to read by the candles, and then I'm theoretically reading by the shamash, however that works. No, it's that having a shamash. If I don't have a shamash, somebody will think, oh, you walks into your house, your candles. Oh, even though you're not reading now, they think that you're going to go there to read by the candles, and you have a shamash. So then people understand, oh, how come that candle's over there on the side? How come it's bigger? What's that candle about? Oh, no, because that's the candle I use if I need light. Those other candles, those are religious candles. I don't use those. So you need the shamash in order to indicate that the other candles are very good, which is why you then need a shamash. You have to put it in a different part of the menorah. They're in front, up top, bottom. Different menorahs have different things. I'll show you maybe a picture or two how they're showing, because they have to distinct. He quotes a minhag that some people would use wax. They use oil for the candles and wax for the shamash. A lot of people, they use candle. The Ramah says we should use candle because they like better than oil. Very interesting, even though in the Beit HaMikdash they didn't have any candles. But many people today still use oil, but then some of them would use the shamash of wax. So basically that's the shamash started. Now there's a second reason we use a shamash. So this is in order to show that the lights are special. I'm not going to get any benefit from them. So I have the shamash, I put it separately. The quotes at the end, I forget from someone who says the shamash, it's a very fascinating idea. The shamash is the most important candle because it's what enables you to light all the other candles. It's a very modern idea. The one who serves the alcohol is worse than the one who drinks. The drug dealer is worse than the drug user. The enabler of the sin is worse than the one who does. So the shamash, it's really, you don't need the shamash. But that's what you use to light the candles. So it's like the Kohen Gadol. That's like the one servicing all the things. Becomes even more important than the other, because there's a second reason, the shamash, and that's the debate whether you can use one candle to light another candle. And we are of the opinion no. So we assume no. Oh, actually, no. The Gemara says yes, but in order to light from one candle to the other, so we have to light, So one is to get benefit. One is, how do I light candle 3? Well, I'm not, especially it's an oil thing. I can't pick up the oil from candle 1 and light candle 3. That ain't going to work. So I need a light Now there I can blow it out right when it's finished. It's only as if it's for 1 second I need it. The other one is the whole time the candles are burning. But so these are the two reasons. Now, because of these two reasons, so Professor Sperber, who also has a degree in art, that's one of his, he wrote Reality of the Talmud. He has, I think, he's a big art expert. So let me just find it and I can show you if I have it. So here you go. I don't know if you'll be able to see it in here, but does anybody notice what do you see in these pictures? What do you see?
Looks like two shamashim.
Two shamashim, yeah, two shamashim. This is
Wow.
from Holland, I think, in the 1800s. Yeah, two shamashim, because the shamash had two purposes. They didn't use one shamash for each purpose. They used one shamash to read from, and one shamash to light the other candle. It's such a beautiful thing, right? It's so cool. So these are pictures of the menorah with two shamashim to correspond to the two ideas of why we use a shamash. Now, just very quickly, okay. Why do we? Okay, it should be candle. Fine, be handled. Why did we move the candle lighting inside?
Here.
For fear.
So right, so mipnei hasakana, because
Right.
the Zoroastrians didn't let us light. They had to only light their light. You couldn't do other light. So that's what. So they forbade the lighting of other candles. So the Jews had to do inside the house. So then the question becomes, so well, yeah, but we live in the free country. Why don't we light outside? So I don't think anybody in America does. I think maybe some people in Israel do. I'll look around tonight and I'll see how many people do and how many people don't. So some people say we should, the sakana's over, we should light outside. And some people say, no. It's like everything in Jewish law. Who cares what the original reason is? Once we start a custom, that's it. The custom stays even if the reason doesn't apply, right? Yontif Sheni, it doesn't apply anymore. We have a fixed calendar, but we all know we keep Yontif Sheni because I actually don't think this answer works so well because it's one thing to be strict. It's one thing to say, I'm going to have a muksa or some other, like most of these are prohibitions. The reason for the prohibition doesn't apply, but we still observe it. So, okay, that's okay. But here you're enhancing the mitzvah. The mitzvah is much better if you go back to the original thing. It's kind of like, maybe to give a sort of very, crazy example, but very much like shaving on Chol HaMoed. The Gemara prohibits like shaving on Chol HaMoed because the fear was, nobody used to go to work on Chol HaMoed, not like today, but everybody was very busy on Erev Yontif, and you didn't have 5 minutes with the electric shaver. Shaving was a big to-do with oils and all this stuff. Took a long time. So people say, I'm too busy. I'll shave on Chol HaMoed, and the rabbis didn't want that. Shema yichnesu lechag menuvalim. They look all ugly and disgusting and disheveled for Yontif. So if you tell them they can't shave on Chol HaMoed, they'll find time to shave Erev Yontif. So what about today? Today, it's not true. So that's why I'm from the school of Rav Soloveitchik, Rav Lichtenstein. You're obligated to shave on Chol HaMoed. What do you mean? You have to look nice. Yeah, the rabbis were willing to let you look disheveled for the last days, even though they didn't like that, because they wanted to make sure for the first days of Yontif you look good. But today, so some people say no, the rabbis made that clear. In the yeshiva world, generally people will not shave on Chol HaMoed. It doesn't matter. And in the modern world, it has nothing to do with your modern or yeshivish. You can be like, it's not a modern, but that's just the way the world works, unfortunately. So, and more in the modern world, people shave because the reason doesn't apply. And here you're enhancing the Yontif. You're enhancing the Kedusha of the Yontif by shaving on Chol HaMoed. You look nice. Anyway, so this is the same thing here. You're enhancing the mitzvah. I would think that's not reason enough. From where I'm coming, I shave on Chol HaMoed, so I'd have to bring the Chanukah candles back outside. So, no. So some say the second reason outside. Tova, how much snow is there in Toronto? I got out just in time. Ice is that
not yet. Hasn't started yet.
Oh, it hasn't started yet, but they canceled all the schools. They're afraid this huge ice storm today.
Yeah.
Toronto, all of Canada, everything. I think in the States too. So gonna light outside. Are you crazy? The candle will light a tenth of a second. So you can build a big box around it and there. So that's already that's too much. You don't have to do that. Light the candles. It won't work outside. If you live in In South Africa, you can light outside. You live in Australia, in the Southern Hemisphere, it's summer now, it's nice, you can light outside. But in Canada, in the Western world, you can't light outside. Anyway, so that's right. I know big boxes are common, but I'm saying some people called that wasn't necessary. The halakha didn't mind you doing. Of course, today people do all kinds of things. Right. Okay, I'm going to end a few minutes early. I apologize.
Can I just ask a question? In the picture that Judy, in the picture that you showed, there were two
shamashim. Yeah.
shamash.
Right.
Yeah, I have a menorah like that, but one is in the form of a picture. In other words, it's from Poland, from I don't know when.
Right.
So yeah, so in other words, that would back up the point that one is to hold the shamash and the other is to pour the oil.
Excellent, for sure. Right. I mean,
Is it that way in his picture or not?
No,
No.
not that I can tell. No, it doesn't look that way.
Okay, but
Listen, there's
actually
so
have
much
that,
you
okay.
can learn from Jewish art. It's not a field I'm so I've actually asked a couple of the people who work in the field of Jewish art to give classes for us, but they're all very busy. They tell me, I guess there are not so many of them, so they got to do a lot of work. But there's
Pictures
really
of how
so
the
much.
B'nai Haman were hung. There were
Right.
all different
Just
kinds of
all-
artistic things.
You can have a year-long course on how the Arba Banim are portrayed in art.
Yes,
That tells you
yes.
much more about the artist than it does about the Arba Banim. You learn a lot about the artist, not so much about the Arba Banim. That's there's so much to learn from art. It's not that they don't teach it in yeshiva. Let's put it that way. It's not on the core of the curriculum. Okay. It is getting late, so let's just do a quick review. And I'm pleased God next week at the same time, and I really do appreciate that so many of you did come, and thank you very much. And invite your friends in Israel. Maybe they don't know, because no, they can come right before Shabbos. What else is there to do? I mean, there's lots of things to do. Okay, I'm sorry for that. You can scratch that from the record. Okay, so we just we finished up a few points in Al Anisim, Alashkicham Torah Techa, because the Greeks were jealous, if they're really true, because Torah, it makes you wise, it makes you the most moral people in the world and the most intellectual, and therefore the Gemara says, that's already a pasuk in the Chumash. The nations will see, wow, look at those Jews. They keep Torah. They're so smart. They're so successful. They're so moral. I want to be just like them. Amazing. And therefore, the Gemara says you have to study science, because that impresses the non-Jews. Yeah, that's part of our mission. That's Moshe telling the people when they go to the land of Israel. And therefore, they didn't like that. They wanted to get rid of it. No. Okay. Then we spent okay, I'll talk about this next year too, about the miracle, okay, the literal thing. Then we spent most of it talking about why Chanukah is not in the Mishnah, either this sort of academic reason that we don't like what the Chashmonim did. They became corrupt. They became the religious leaders. I mean, they became the political leaders instead of sticking to religion. And is that really true? The Rambam seems to say there's nothing wrong with that, as long as Jewish sovereignty is we're celebrating, even if the people are not religious. It doesn't come out and say it, but that's the feeling you get from the Rambam. The Rambam knew what happened, but he didn't care. He felt that having a Jewish state for 200 years, who cares? It's wonderful. I think this is so important for our time, sort of that debate, so to speak. It's interesting. It's the Ramban who is critical of the Chashmonim, who's the one who very much extols the mitzvah of living in Israel. The Rambam doesn't even count living in Israel as one of the 613 mitzvot, but that's a whole other shir that we don't have time for now. It's the Ramban who is the great lover of Israel, of the Rishonim. Not that the Rambam didn't, but he doesn't count it as a mitzvah for whatever reason. And then we said the Rav's wild reason about why the Rambam has to tell the story of Chanukah has nothing to do with he's justifying the halakha that they became kings, because you don't have any books. How are you going to know about Chanukah? Very strange, because the Rambam is reading Greek. Oh, that's what he says, to study philosophy. Don't have any Jewish books except the Tanakh and the Mishnah Torah. Then you can study Aristotle and Plato and things like that. You understand why they burned the books of the Rambam. The Rambam in the Mishnah Torah, the Rambam downplays learning. Look in Hilchot Yesodei Torah. The Rambam says Davar Katan, that's a Bayin Rava. Davar Gadol, that's metaphysics. Masei Merkava, that's the real cool stuff. By Rabbi, that's like little stuff. It's an amazing thing. So people sort of ignore those Rambams. Because it's too difficult to accept that Rambam for people. Okay, whatever. The Rambam says if you learn in Kollel, you lose your share in the world to come. Rambam says lots of things. Rambam was a very bold thinker, and he didn't care what anybody else thought. He didn't care what anybody else thought so much he never quotes anybody else. That's one of the things they didn't like. Unlike the Shulchan Aruch, some say this, some the Rambam, my way or the highway. That's he didn't quote anybody else. This is I don't give you any source. You don't have to look up the sources. It's all what I say. The Rambam, but the Rambam was the greatest. There was nobody as great as the Rambam. Moshe, low come Moshe. It's all true. Just have to figure it out. Okay, and then we discussed possibly they didn't want to antagonize the Romans. And there's a general question: Bichlal, what gets in the Mishnah, what doesn't get in the Mishnah? There was discussed how they were halal. The Maram Rutenberg put it in. It comes from Masechet, Yisroel, but it's really a later day addition. Probably people did use the Ner of Chanukah for holy things, but they really didn't become a question probably until they brought it inside, which is when our shamash became important. Probably when it was outside, they just listed the shamash, they threw it away, but then becomes a way to demonstrate that the shamash is different from everything else. And then, of course, we use it to light the candles, and maybe the shamash becomes even more important than all the other candles because it allows you to light. Okay, and then should we go back to lighting outside? So you see, in America, I don't think anybody's gone back. In Israel, some do, some don't. It's been a while since I've been here for Chanukah, so I'll try to take a look, which means I got to go and to daven mincha. So thank you very much. Want to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom. A triple header tomorrow, 3 Sefer Torah. It doesn't happen very often. So even if it's snowing, if it's icy, maybe don't go to shul. I want you to slip. But if it's snowy and cold, you still go to shul. And everybody should have a Chanukah Samech. And please, God, we'll see you next Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. in Israel. Okay, everybody be well. Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi
Bye.
King, for taking
Thank
the time from Israel. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Okay.
Take care. Say hi to everybody.
Good night. Bye-bye. Shabbat
Bye.
Shalom.